So it must have been felt so great to get your own episode this season. When did you find out you were going to get to delve more into Jane's backstory?
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was funny. I found out we had like a little screening of season one, and our showrunner, Dan Fogelman, who's so brilliant, I had brought a friend to watch the first episode, the screening, and Dan was starting to talk about like plans for next season, and I was like, "Oh wait, don't spoil anything because my friend doesn't know what happens." And he was like, "Okay, we're working on a backstory episode for you playing a psychopath." And I was like, "That's a huge spoiler that she doesn't know yet." Um, but that got me excited because I was like, "Okay, we're gonna dive more into Jane. She's sort of intentionally in the background in the first season so that the surprise is so strong. But yeah, I was very, very excited to get those scripts.
Knowing that you were going to play this cold-hearted, cold-blooded psychopath, how did you prepare for it? Did you do any kind of research, or was it just more talking to Dan?
It was definitely a lot of talking to Dan. I tried to read up a little bit on, sociopathy, psychopathy, and kind of like the truth is, like, most of them like study human behavior way more than we realize so that they can like emulate it. So I was kind of trying to live in that space and then also just recognizing that like stillness was probably my best answer because there's so many different ways to like play crazy, but I was like, I don't want to fall into any traps in that way. In some ways, I think it's like it's always the person who's like the quietest in an argument who wins. Like that's not me in real life. In real life, I'm crying within like 2 seconds. But yeah, I just thought her strength would be in like her stillness and sort of her observation of other people.
The episode kind of lays out from the top that she was born bad. Do you think that she was born bad? Do you think that she was set out to be a killer from the start?
I know it's interesting. I kind of wondered that, and I think I tried to talk to our writers and our showrunner, and they're sort of on the fence as well. Like, is this nature? Is this nurture? Was she cursed in some way with this like premonition that this guy has, or like all the messaging that he gets? And I kind of landed on like, I think it's probably the latter. Like, I think there's like, her mom gets this message from this guy, and clearly it wasn't a great mother, and so it kind of like informed how she was raised. But it's a question that I still am toying with because I'm also like, I think psychopathy you kind of are born with. So it's a question of like, is Jane just really good at her job? She's fallen into this like, hire for kill situation, and like it just can detach in a way because of how she was raised and therefore doesn't have much emotion around it, but is really good at her job. There's like a childlike innocence to her in some ways too that we had fun playing with in season one, where she loves the carnivals and the pretty dresses, and I think that's real. Like I don't think that was necessarily an act. It just helped serve her cover. I don't know. Was she born insane? Maybe, but we all have room for growth.
She also seems to be seeking out maternal approval, or at least the approval of strong female figures in her life.
hmm Yeah, that became sort of a big push for her, especially in episode 6. It made the dynamic with Sinatra, Julianne Nicholson, really interesting because I think it sort of started to establish why Jane might be like more obsessed with her in a way and why she follows her orders so blindly. But I think it taps into like everyone has a desire to be loved, and if her mother abandoned her and she's kind of jealous of seeing those relationships, she's like seeking that out with kind of anyone who pays her any attention. But then, of course, as we see, Jane takes it way too far. And like, it's like a dog bringing like a dead squirrel home, and they're like, "Do you love this?" And you're like, "Ew, no." But
That
you
is
forget
my
the dog,
favorite line. What was your reaction? I mean, it was kind of hilarious, like how literally she takes it.
Oh my God, I read that and I was shocked, and then I also was like, "Oh my God, I'm forever going to be remembered as the character who, chopped someone's member off."
Just following orders.
Just, but yeah, no, that was one of those moments where I think like yes, Jane is controlled in some ways and then like completely unhinged in others and doesn't really understand the difference a lot of the time. And I think that's kind of what makes her so um scary is the instability.
And it feels like, to go back to her relationship with Sinatra, Sinatra sees all of that in her and is really able to manipulate her and use her to her advantage.
There's definitely a power shift between Jane and Sinatra, particularly after season one, because Jane shoots her and says that it was to protect her, but was it really, or was it for that we, or was she protective of her at that time and knew it was the only way to, save her? But it was really fun to play with Julianne, particularly in episode three, and then again in episode six and seven, we see a little bit of sort of their dance, which she's just, I mean, she's such a brilliant actress in her own right. So like I felt similar to Jane just in like admiring watching Julianne work. I was like, oh right, I have to do the scene too. So that was kind of a funny mirror of sorts.
Literally, when she's like standing in front of the mirror and trying to
Yeah,
like style her hair like
trying to
Sinatra.
become Sinatra. I know. Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments. I We got to play around with that a lot and we sort of had Jane sitting in her desk and like touching her things and then going up to the mirror and kind of like, yeah, does she love her? Does she want her to be her mother? Does she want to be her? Does she have those aspirations to kind of take over? I don't know, but there is something like spooky that happens in the mirror with that moment.
So what do you think, like, to have you answer that question, what do you think her ultimate goal is? Does she want to be her? Does she just want to get so close to her?
There's a scene, a very short scene with me and Hadley, Sinatra's daughter. I think it was in episode three where Hadley's worried about her mom going back to work and she says, make sure nothing happens to her. And Jane says, like, I will not let anything happen to her, I promise. I believed that, even though she did just shoot her and she's the reason that she's recovering. I was like, oh, I think Jane means that. I think Jane does want to protect her and wants to believe that she's sort of in her inner circle as well and is like so obsessed with that approval that like the mirror moment sort of gives her the opportunity to say to herself what she wants to hear from Sinatra.
How does it feel for you? I mean, the season really doesn't have a villain, but so to speak, but whatever passes for a villain this season is basically you. How does that feel for you to carry that on your shoulders?
I mean, it's funny. Like the fan reactions have been really funny. I don't usually see a lot, but I feel like the Paradise Instagram has been um reposting a lot of things and I'm so glad people are having such a strong reaction to Jane. It makes it fun. I mean, it's hilarious to be sort of like hated as a character. Just as a people pleaser in my life, I'm like, oh, but don't you see Jane's heart? But it definitely makes it far more interesting to play like a very complicated character. And yeah, like you say, I think like Sinatra and Jane in their own right are sort of the two, at least like female characters this season who are sort of like walking that line of evil or villain. And um, I'm happy to wear that hat right now.
They're kind of like the dynamic duo in this very weird way, but you're not really sure what their motivations are and what they're trying to accomplish.
Exactly. And like, I don't think either of them know what the other one is really thinking. And so, yeah, they're kind of walking on eggshells with each other too.
Right, because they're not being entirely honest with each other. Like they don't, neither is telling each other what they're doing. They're sort of like, okay, can I have a breath mint? So you're like, oh, I guess I'll just go kill this guy. But like, sure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they definitely have their own language, which like God, Julianne's just so good. I was laughing at that moment where she's like, he needs a breath mint, and then she like does this like perfect little stare up at Jane, which I couldn't really see through the mirror that we shot it through in the moment, but watching it on the episode, I was like, Julianne, she's scary. Sinatra's scary.
Talk about the face off with Gabby, Dr. Tarabi. Why does Dr. Tarabi go and confront her? That face off
Yeah.
isn't going to end well. Let's put it that
I
way.
know. We kind of both questioned that a little bit because we were kind of like, okay, if Dr. Tarabi knows how dangerous Jane is and she has no experience with, someone of that, capable of that level of like violence and deceit, why would she confront her in that way. And so Sarah and I sort of tried to discuss it and make sense of it. And I think part of it is like she just is laying her cards on the table and she's like, I want you to know that someone knows and I am that someone. I thought that it would kind of like excite Jane in a way, like a cat and mouse type thing where she's suddenly like, oh, this is interesting, because obviously Robinson was onto her and she sort of handles her in her own way by blaming her for the president's murder. But Jane probably doesn't see her as much of a threat. So I think she's kind of like, oh, great, let's see where this goes. But then is also competitive with Gabriella for Sinatra's like friendship and attention. And I think at one point Gabriella says like, it's different. Or she's gonna do the same thing she did with me. And I'm like, no, 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 it's different with us. So Jane does have blind spots, and we're kind of starting to see those as well.
It's also great watching her confrontation with Link and that gang of guys. Like, underestimate her at your own peril, guys.
Oh my God, that was so fun to shoot. It was just fun to like metaphorically and truly leave the bunker. And get to meet the like rest of the cast that had been shooting kind of this separate storyline. And yeah, I just love the confrontation. I love that Jane kind of leads with like, I'm just sweet and like, my hair's down and flowing in the wind and hi, and then kind of like very quickly establishes like she's not messing around. We had a lot of fun shooting that scene.
It must feel so great too to just see all these empowered female characters. They really sort of step up in the back half of the season. And what does that mean to you to play such a strong female character?
I do think the world would be a better place if more women were in charge, although maybe not these women. They're a bit diabolical, but they are really intelligent. And, most of them are kind of doing things for the higher good. Like even Jane, who does like some pretty awful things, believes she's doing it for a purpose. It's really fun to play complex women and strong women, which we need more of in film and television these days.